This is the new iPad Air, the 5th generation. The blue this year is more saturated and it looks really good. And somehow this extra saturation makes it more like a pro device. The size and weight are both comfortable for tablet tasks as usual, including sitting down on a couch and reading articles or books or taking notes with an Apple Pencil. The iPad Air's 10.9-inch display is slightly smaller than the 11-inch on the iPad Pro, but it's still large enough for a great movie experience. It does start to feel a little bit cramped when you're using it for laptop-like works with split screens and multitasking mode. The iPad Air doesn't have as advanced of a speaker system as the Pro, with just 2 speakers instead of 4. But the 2 speakers it has are on the opposite sides of the tablet with 4 cutouts, which does provide a stereo experience that is loud and clear for anything I want to watch or listen to. However, most of the sound comes out from the bottom speakers whenever you're holding it like landscape mode, like this. And I found out about this when I was typing my Wi-Fi password, holding it like so, and I could hear the clicking sound from the keypad, the keyboard to be exact, coming out from the right side and not on the left side because I was blocking the speaker. And as I was trying to game with this device, it just like when I'm holding it like this, it blocks the speaker like all the way. So it definitely kills the volume whenever you're playing games. Now I guess you could kind of like flip it upside down and use it the other way when you're playing games. However, the power on and off button is actually right inside your palm, so don't get too excited while you're playing or else you're gonna just turn off the display and die in your game. And that not only kills the gaming experience, after playing the game for a while, if you have like sweaty palms like me when you're playing like games on your iPad or iPhone, the camera here is actually right behind the button as well. So like with all the sweat and fingerprint on my palm, it makes like smudges on the camera. So don't forget to wipe down the camera whenever you need to use it, either for document scanning or any sort of AR experience. One of the great things about the new iPad Air is that it is still compatible and supports the previous accessories, such as the very expensive Magic Keyboard, as well as the 2nd generation of the Apple Pencil. Sometimes I do wish that Apple can update their Magic Mouse and be able to charge like the 2nd generation of the Apple Pencil. The front-facing camera now supports center stage, and you can use that either in FaceTime or Zoom. It kind of follows you around and pinpoint your face to like right in the middle, and it does zoom in on your face and try to make your face in the center of the frame. I don't really like how it kind of zooming into my face all the time, and honestly I just don't move that much in any sort of video conference or meeting. I do see the appeal if you're doing like a presentation, but for my need, most of the time I just kind of turn center stage off because I just don't move around at all in video calls. And plus this way I can really angle the iPad to like wherever I want my frame to be instead of it trying to pick like whichever way looks better. In this case, most of the time it just kind of zooms into my face, which I personally don't like that all the time. And the new iPad Air doesn't use Face ID. Instead, it uses Touch ID that's built in right into the wake and sleep button. The scanner works really well, and it reminds me of the old iPhone or the new iPhone SE that has the Touch ID fingerprint reader right at the home button. It's quite fast, and everyone is used to it by now. But I have to say though, on a tablet like this, it's not nearly as convenient or seamless like the iPad Pro, where I can just swipe up using Face ID without having to reach and that extra movement to do the Touch ID gesture. So the alternative way for me, at least right now, is to use my palm for Touch ID. And so far it works surprisingly well. I was able to access my apps almost as fast as using Face ID. I know that might sound super lazy, but it just works. And honestly, I feel like if you can have Touch ID and Face ID, both of them in one device, that would be the dream. As for the back camera, the iPad Air only has one. It doesn't have ultra wide or LiDAR scanner or flash. It's just one regular camera. I personally find this design and cutout kind of boring and weak at the same time, where I much prefer the iPad Pro's design on the back. The cutout just looks much better compared to this. As for performance, the 5th generation of the iPad Air now has the M1 chip that can be found on MacBook Air, iMac, and even the 13-inch MacBook Pro. But honestly, I don't think most consumer will notice the performance difference coming from the previous A13 or A14 chip, unless you're rendering 3D modeling work or heavy video editing with RAW files. With that being said, if you're looking for a new iPad that'll last you for a very long time down the road, then the M1 will most likely last longer with that 8 gigs of RAM. And for me, editing photos and videos on this device is fantastic. It's super smooth. I was able to load up hundreds of raw photos and edit them in Lightroom without a hassle. And I really enjoy editing my short videos on the iPad Air, more than I like to admit. Usually I just shoot with my phone and the footage will sync with my iPad Air, where I can just drop them into CapCut and edit them with breeze. And playing games does drain the battery faster like expected, and does get a bit warm on the back of the iPad Air, but nothing serious so far. Doing simple tasks such as web browsing, reading books, and taking notes on a daily basis gives me several days of battery life as expected on a tablet this size. I feel like using the everyday tasks on the iPad Air, it's pretty much the same throughout all the previous iPads, and there's just nothing that stands out to me so far. The biggest change is most likely with the performance on the M1 chip and that 8 gigs of RAM, where most consumers won't even need to use that much of power, to be honest. The new iPad Air starts at $599 with 64 gigs for storage, which I wouldn't really recommend if you plan on using it for several years down the road, because apps are taking more and more space on our devices, and 64 gig is simply not enough. If you're just using the iPad Air for web browsing, reading books, listening to music, or doing miscellaneous tasks from here and there, then 64 gigs for storage might just be enough. But seriously though, running out of storage on your device, it's never fun. So definitely think this through and pick the right amount of storage that you need for the work that you're doing on the iPad Air. Now, if you want to upgrade the storage on the new iPad Air, it's a pretty steep jump to 256 gig, and that will cost you an extra $150, which bring up the total cost to $749. But here's the catch. The 128 gig storage of the iPad Pro, it's $799, which is only $50 difference. The iPad Pro does give you one extra camera with LiDAR scanner and flash, as well as Face ID and 120Hz ProMotion display, which most consumer probably don't need. I mean, it does look and feel better overall, but these features are just not a necessity for most consumers. Speaking of the display, if you're an artist, then you will most definitely notice the difference from the 120Hz to the 60Hz on the iPad Air. The 120Hz ProMotion display is just buttery smooth, but not to the point where I spend the extra $200 for it if I don't have a way of utilizing it. So if you're not sure to get the iPad Pro or the iPad Air, then most likely you won't need the extra features on the iPad Pro. With that being said, having the M1 chip inside the iPad Air, it's pretty much a no-brainer for most people to go with. And you most likely won't need a new tablet going down several years with updates from Apple, because it has the M1 chip with 8 gigs of RAM, which is more than fast and capable on a tablet like this. Overall, I feel like the iPad Air, as of now, it's the best iPad for most people.